What's going on, you guys? It's your boy Patrick, aka Addicted to Combat, back for another week of UFC fights. We've got the last pay-per-view of the year, UFC 282 for the vacant light heavyweight championship, potential 5-round bout at 205 between Magomed Ankalaev and former champion Jan Blachowicz. There's currently only 12 fights on this card. We did have a couple drop off just today, so I believe OSP is out of a dance partner, and so is Santiago Ponzinibbio. So 12 fights left to talk about. I will still try to be brief with this one, as I will have a live stream tomorrow night at 9:30 Central Time. I'll be having Clint from the Die Hard MMA podcast as my guest. The props will have dropped by that point. We can talk about those, dissect some good betting spots, and just have a good old time. So join that live stream tomorrow. And yeah, check out BetUS Sportsbook, who I'm partnered with as well. See my promo code in the description and on the screen. Addicted to Combat 125 for a 125% deposit bonus match on any deposit from $100 up to $2,500. Free money to bet with, an easy way to support the channel here at Addicted to Combat. And without further ado, let's break into the first fight of the prelims. First fight of the night, we've got a battle between two undefeated young bantamweights making their debut. Cameron Saaiman at 21 years old versus Steven Koslow at 25 years old. Both of these young bantamweights making their debut are 6-0 as a professional, with some amateur experience as well. Cameron Saaiman, a very big favorite here at -275. Steven Koslow on short notice, replacing Ronnie Lawrence, is the +230 underdog. And, the same record for both guys. Steven Koslow, a couple years older, about the same size. Why is one guy almost a 3-1 favorite in Cameron Saaiman? Some of that has to do with the promotion he was in. He was in the South African regional promotion, EFC. Pretty well-known, decent level of competition there. He's also just a more well-rounded guy, and he's coming off of a successful round 3 knockout over Josh Wayne Kim on the Contender Series back in August. So a pretty stunning debut under the UFC banner, technically, now making his official debut. 4 knockouts, 1 submission on his record with 1 decision as well. Whereas Steven Koslow, off the American regional scene, pretty soft level of competition. His opponents actually went a combined 13 wins and 22 losses, so not very good combined record for those guys. Pretty much over nobodies. And the guy has 6 wins, but 6 round 1 submissions. Pretty one-dimensional fighter, in my opinion. Looks very slow and plodding as a lanky bantamweight. No real striking skill at all to speak of. His footwork looks pretty basic and poor. He doesn't really turn his hips into his strikes, and it's just all for show to get in range. Back his opponent towards the cage and eventually look to get them down. And the opponents I saw him fight did not really have any resistance at all in giving up their takedowns. So Cameron Saaiman looked very good on the Contender Series. For a 21-year-old in such a big spot, the guy was switching stances pretty casually, accurate on his target, good striking output, and very good defensive grappling as well. When his opponent tried to take him down, he actually was taken down at one point and worked his way back up while walking on the cage, things like that. So good leg kicks, very good hand speed, and obviously good power scoring that round 3 knockout. I'm going to take Cameron Saaiman here to win the fight, probably inside the distance. No way would I ever lay -275 on a 21-year-old, pretty unproven guy, over anybody making their debut. Now, Steven Koslow, no need to even think about putting an underdog sprinkle on him either at +230. The guy just does not have a good skill set. It's very one-dimensional. So he could pull off a round 1 submission. That would be his path to victory. But short of that, I think Cameron Saaiman can either knock him out early or late. I even think if this goes to the grappling, I would prefer Cameron Saaiman, and I think he could come out the better man there on the mat. So give me Cameron Saaiman to win inside the distance. I like the fight doesn't go to decision. I like the unders, and I do like Cameron to win inside the distance here. That might chop down that big money line. Up next at men's flyweight, we've got a battle between two Brazilians, Daniel da Silva and Vinicius Salvador. Vinicius Salvador, another one of these guys making his debut off of a successful Contender Series bout back in September, I believe. He got a round 2 knockout over the favorite that night. So he was an underdog with Salvador, I think like a +200 underdog. Very free-flowing, creative striker, and very loose and powerful as well for 125. He's got 13 knockouts out of 14 professional wins at flyweight. Pretty unheard of for Vinicius Salvador. He knocked out Shannon Ross with a flurry of very loose and powerful, like left hooks, right hooks against the cage, giant swinging haymakers, and they were still accurate somehow. He keeps his hands low and relies on his head movement and his upper body movement as well. And at 26 years old, for both guys, they should still have the speed, the reflexes to get away with things like this at flyweight, where everybody's fast. But Daniel Da Silva is 0-3 in the UFC. All of those losses coming under 1.5 rounds. 2 of them knockouts, 1 of them a submission. So I really think Daniel Da Silva will be cut from the promotion either way. If he wins here or if he loses, this will be his last fight on his contract. Now, his first fight in the promotion, Daniel Da Silva was given a pretty good opponent, Jeff Molina. After he screwed that up by gassing out in round 2 and getting finished, they gave him one last chance, in my opinion, against Francisco Figueiredo, a guy they probably expected him to beat. He got heel hooked very early into the fight, like a minute or so in. So after that, now they just gave him to Altamirano, knocked him out in round 1. Now they're giving him another debutant from the Dana White Contender Series in Vinicius Salvador. So as expected, Salvador coming in here, 14-4 record. He is a -190 favorite. Daniel Da Silva, the +165 underdog here. So kind of surprised it's not even more, to be honest. But with Salvador's style, he is kind of hittable. Although he seems tough, Daniel Da Silva could get a round 1 knockout. Or most likely he will fade after round 1, either get finished in late round 1 or finished in round 2. So give me Vinicius Salvador to score a successful debut with a round 2 knockout. I like the guy's aggression. I like the guy's creative style, pull counters, and the fight doesn't go to decision. Very good here. The over and under is set at 1.5, which makes it tricky for a flyweight fight because it's heavily favored to go under 1.5, but in a flyweight fight, even though the numbers support it, that's still a scary proposition. Sometimes, it just doesn't happen at flyweight as often as other weight classes. So I would stay off the overs and unders, but fight doesn't go or the alternate under 2.5. I like those very much, along with Vinicius Salvador to get the W. Up next at featherweight, we've got Eric Silva taking on TJ Brown. This is not the Eric Silva from about 10 years ago from Brazil. This is a Dana White Contender Series guy making his debut from Venezuela. Now, 35 years old, Eric Silva making his official UFC debut off the Contender Series this past season. So a lot of these guys are younger that are getting signed. 9-1 record as a pro. They must see something for Eric Silva, giving him a shot here at the featherweight division. 5'9", so the same height for each guy, only 1 inch of reach in the favor of the 3-year younger man, TJ Brown. So Eric Silva was a big favorite. It quickly corrected to a pick and price tag now. Probably money still coming in on TJ Brown if I had to guess. I think he should be the rightful favorite here. 16-9 record for TJ Brown. He has 5 fights in the UFC already where he's gone 2-3. In those, coming off of a decision loss to Shahbazyan Nordin-Beck. A fight that I'm sure a lot of people thought, and myself included, he should have won that fight. But he dropped the ball. He does tend to fade late as a grueling fight goes on. But Eric Silva presents none of the threats that I think Shahbazyan Nordin-Beck presented as far as the strength, the technical wrestling, at least some offense with the striking. Eric Silva does have a Kenpo karate background, but make no mistake, the guy just wants to get the fight to the mat and get a rear naked choke. He did that in the Lux fight promotion in Mexico. 4-0 record in that fight league before the Contender Series, where he got 4 round 1 knockouts. So Eric Silva has not actually seen the judges' scorecards, I believe, since like 2018 or early 2019. So who knows what his durability looks like. You don't see a lot of his striking. He's fighting a lot of other strikers on the regional scene and even on the Contender Series. And these guys don't have great records, and they fold under pressure of that takedown threat immediately. I don't see TJ Brown folding under that pressure. He is a BJJ black belt himself, and he's got much better, more powerful technical striking, does TJ Brown early in the fight. So I think he could finish this fight inside the distance, especially if this goes late. It will be interesting to see what Silva looks like. But yeah, I mean, I've got no reason to believe that TJ Brown will fold early under the grappling threat of Eric Silva. I'd be very surprised. Eric Silva does have some pretty good ground and pound, but again, he's got to get the fight into that realm, get up close, into close quarters striking range, and take TJ Brown down and manhandle him. So I don't see that happening. TJ Brown is 3-3 in decisions with 9 submissions of his own. So give me TJ Brown here. I did take a stab on his money line at -105. Up next at featherweight, we've got a very fun fight between Billy Quarantillo and Alexander Hernandez. Alexander Hernandez coming off of a round 2 submission loss to Renato Moicano. It was under the 1.5 round mark back in February, and now he's switched weight classes. His first fight at featherweight, he does have a 5-4 UFC record at lightweight, and now at 30 years old making this change. He was a very muscular guy at 155, probably has some size to give up to make that weight cut, so we'll see how it goes. Billy Q is 16-4, a very solid record in the UFC so far, and this guy is just a chaotic, active fighter that will fight for your dollar every step of the way. Weaponized cardio, high striking output, attempts a ridiculous amount of strikes and takedowns in between. Submission attempts, he's never resting in one spot, always making his opponents work. He'll take them to deep water and then drown them in round 3. He does have a few round 3 finishes on his record. Pretty much a war of attrition with this guy. So Billy Q also coming off of a loss. About 13 months ago, he lost a 3-round war against Shane Burgos, slightly out-edged on the scorecards there, gave up the bigger strikes, the bigger moments, and I believe some control time as well. Oddly enough, both of these two guys, Hernandez and Quarantillo, both mix in takedowns pretty regularly in between their strikes. Hernandez, this is a spot where he could really employ wrestling as, well as scoring a KO in this fight. Kind of a defensively lacking opponent in Billy Quarantillo. That's really my only knock on Quarantillo is his striking defense leaves a lot to be desired. He gets hit 5.8 significant strikes every minute is what he absorbs. I mean, on average, that's pretty substantial, although he does have a 7.74 significant strikes he lands on his opponents. So just a product of chaotic fighting style. But I do like it. He fights for your dollar every step of the way. Now, I give the cardio, of course, to Billy Q. I give the striking output, Billy Q. Durability, probably even, because, Alexander Hernandez has been finished in all 3 of his UFC losses. Knocked out by Donald Cerrone, finished by Renato Moicano most recently. And I got to say, I think Hernandez's best win to date was still his debut. He knocked out Beneil Dariush in like a minute in round 1, I believe. It was pretty early in round 1, if memory serves me right. But Hernandez, he can tend to slow down. After round 1, after that 1.5 round mark, that power threat no longer there. I think 7 out of 8 of Hernandez's finishes, knockouts and submissions are all in round 1. So this guy's going to slow down. I expect Billy Q to take over, so we'll see if Hernandez, how he looks at 145, if that power even translates to this weight class. That's kind of an unknown. But one thing is for sure, Billy Q, minus 165 on the money line. I think that's a fair price for a guy that's going to fight for your dollar every round of the fight. And he's not the guy, coming in here at a new weight class. So Billy Q, 4 years older, he'll be 34 on fight night, but I got to say, I think he either takes a round 3 finish or a decision win here over Alexander Hernandez. So I haven't made the bet yet, but I'm pretty sure I might end up with a moneyline bet on Billy Q. Up next at middleweight, we've got a very fun fight between 2 exciting strikers. Chris Curtis taking on Joaquin Buckley at middleweight. You've got 29-9, the record for Chris Curtis, who's been pretty much everywhere, every big promotion in MMA. Joaquin Buckley, 15-5, a little bit less pro experience, but more UFC experience at this point for Joaquin Buckley, who will be the younger man by about 7 years at 28 years old for Buckley, 35 for Chris Curtis. Both men coming off of losses here, trying to right the wrongs of their UFC career. Chris Curtis, slightly bigger at 5'10", 1 inch less of reach, though. You've got those long athletic arms of Joaquin Buckley. That's always surprising. And Chris Curtis is coming off of that short notice overseas visit to face Jack Hermanson, where he got outstruck, doubled up, and then some on the striking numbers. Very bad performance. I mean, Jack Hermanson looked very good. Curtis, very bad. Curtis could just not get in range and actually showed a little bit of deficiency in, I think, like what am I trying to say? The mental composure, I would say. I've always seen Chris Curtis as more of like kind of a fun-loving, more humble guy who's, not easily rattled. Maybe I'm wrong in that. I mean, he looked very frustrated by round 2 and round 3 against Jack Hermanson, talking shit to him, and really just seems like his head was not in the game. He just couldn't find the range, and he got frustrated and lost the fight, almost gave up on himself. But again, remember, it was short notice and it was overseas. So that was the first loss in the UFC for Chris Curtis. Since he came into the UFC late last year, he was an underdog a couple of times, I believe, especially a big underdog to Phil Hawes. a solid underdog against Brendan Allen. He knocked both of them out. And that's what I like about Chris Curtis, is he can end the fight at any point, whereas Joaquin Buckley, I see as having that slow, methodical, one-hit KO power. Usually earlier than later, he has to get that done. So that's kind of an advantage to give to Chris Curtis. Usually both guys struggle against grapplers. They will not have to deal with that in this bout. Buckley, of course, always going to live in fame for that creative spinning back kick he had, jumping back kick he had over Impa Kasangane in 2020. Creative striker, very explosive. Got to say, the level of competition in hindsight that he's knocking out, not that great. His cardio doesn't look that great, but he's been in some spots in his wins where he has better cardio than the poor cardio of his opponent. Albert Jurayev comes to mind. Buckley has been finished by 3 different people. In the UFC, a couple of people, Kevin Holland and Alessio Di Chirico, by that massive head kick. So he can get timed, he can be predictable, and he can get knocked out. But again, I just think his finishing potential is early in this spot. Chris Curtis has shown finishing potential in round 3 many a time before. In fact, he tends to get better as the fight goes on in some cases. And I just think Chris Curtis is the looser guy. Goes to the body. His combinations are accurate. Usually finds his targets in very long combinations, whereas Joaquin Buckley is kind of one big overhand at a time, one big high kick at a time. And it slows down as the fight goes. So give me Chris Curtis to be the faster mover, the more experienced guy. Giving up some age, but so far I don't see that being an issue. Joaquin Buckley's a sizable favorite, minus 155. You can get Chris Curtis for about plus 135. And I did take him as an underdog with a moneyline bet. So give me Chris Curtis, round 3 knockout. Up next at middleweight, we've got the return of Edmen Shahbazyan to face Dulce Lungiambula. A spot at middleweight where we've got a massive favorite in Shahbazyan here. Returning after a 13-month layoff, he's like a minus 300 favorite. Dulce Lungiambula about a plus 250 or so underdog. And neither guy should be that big of a favorite, despite whatever advantages you see for Shahbazyan. They're both coming off of 3-fight losing streaks. Shahbazyan has been on a streak of, well, I guess Lungiambula as well. They start really well, and then they drop the ball instantly. And, just are putty in their opponent's hands, get finished. So 11-3 record for Shahbazyan. He is the bigger man by quite a bit. 6'2" versus 5'8" or 5'9" for Dulce. Massive age, gap in the favor of Shahbazyan. 25 years old, still at this point in his career. 35 for Dulce Lungiambula. This is a spot where Lungiambula is the much bigger, muscular athlete, but much smaller stature as far as the measurables go. This is a reason why Lungiambula falls apart. He's got all of that muscle to carry around, burns himself out, doesn't really pace himself, but neither does Shahbazyan a lot of the time in his career. Hopefully that time off and just some maturity at 25 years old, maybe he can pace himself. He's a very dangerous karate fighter, 9 knockouts out of 11 wins so far for Shahbazyan, and he's been facing a lot of grapplers, let's not forget. At a young age, he had a fast rise, probably what was he, 22, 23, facing Derek Brunson, who's an amazing wrestler in the division, and he got bullied around, taken down, grounded out cardioed, and TKO'd in round 3. He had to face the grappler Jack Hermanson, another very high-ranked guy at the time. Dropped the ball. It was a decision, but he got 10-8'd, I believe, in round 3. Now, he then fought a well-rounded young savage in Nasruddin Imavov, where, again, the grappling submission threat from Imavov, that was really the undoing of Shahbazyan, and the cardio probably as well. So Shahbazyan's got really good tools in the clinch. He's got good knees, good elbows, really tight boxing and long-rangey strikes, good distance control. It's going to be the much faster man against Lungiambula, who's super slow and plodding, and Lungiambula is powerful, but let's face it, the guy, you can see his strikes coming from a mile away. He loads up everything, telegraphs all of his strikes. I think Shahbazyan will be safe early, drag this fight out into round 2 and get a TKO stoppage there. And this will be a good striker versus striker matchup. I know Lungiambula was a judo player, a submission wrestler at some points, but he's got one submission. You never really see this happen unless you get really tied up in the clinch with the guy, then you're in trouble. But If Shahbazyan can stay at range, I think this will be a striking versus striking matchup, and he'll come out the victor and actually outpace somebody for once in the UFC and get a W next to his name once again. Up next, a very interesting fight at bantamweight between the 6-0 undefeated 18-year-old prospect Raul Rosas Jr. taking on 11 years his senior, Jay Perrin. And both guys at bantamweight are looking for their first win inside the octagon. Jay Perrin has been here twice already. I believe both of them this year. He's gone 0-2. Raul Rosas Jr. coming off of a successful September Contender Series decision win. His first decision win in his career. This kid is a Mexican grappling whiz. Shoots for the takedown almost immediately every fight. Successful in getting it. And he's got a wide array of different submissions up his sleeve. Ways to advance position. And he softens up his opponents with ground and pound as well. So a reliable game plan. The youth and seemingly a knack for his skill in the grappling. So this is kind of a grappler versus striker matchup, but more of a grappler in Rosas versus a generalist in Jay Perrin. Jay Perrin will, however, be the undoubtedly the better striker for sure. I mean, he's got almost double the experience, more than double the pro experience of Rosas Jr. Perrin comes from a combat sports background. I think he might have been a Golden Gloves boxer when he was younger. I know his family is family friends with Mickey Ward. Shout out to my guy Lou Betya and Wheezy on the MMA Engine. They interviewed him for his last fight, and he talked about the heritage there with Mickey Ward and Jay Perrin's family legacy. But I know he's a striking coach at a certain, I think maybe Syndicate as well. I'm not quite sure. But either way, Jay Perrin, probably the better striker here. Rosas Jr., durability and striking skill kind of on the table as far as an unknown goes, because he's never standing at striking range long enough for us to see. I mean, very low-level opponents so far and just not a lot of tape on the kid. So from what I've seen, he's got kind of like a switch stance, maybe leads with the southpaw stance style, kind of loose and relaxed on his feet. Good kicks, doubles and triples up the jab to get in range, back his opponent up, and then he shoots for a lightning-fast takedown. Very successful. He does have some nice leg kicks as well, and then sometimes he catches his opponent's kicks and uses that as the takedown entry. But I got to say, I'm taking Rosas here, but the money line is way too wide. Minus 250 for Rosas Jr., plus 200 for Jay Perrin. A total dog or pass spot, and this is a spot where you're going to get a chance to fade a debuting Contender Series massive favorite who's 18 years old. You're fading an actual kid against a grown man here. Pretty awesome, but I got to say, I think Rosas can pull this off more likely than not. I just think he's way better at the grappling realm, better than Jay Perrin is at any of his individual skills. So, and you've got a kid who's athletic enough, fast enough, and he's relentless. He's going to, no doubt he's going to go for the takedown within a few seconds time. He's reliable in that aspect to employ the game plan, and the submissions he pulls off to just gain position or actually threaten it. The Sulov stretch in his last fight, ooh, that looks like such a painful submission. I'd rather have my arm broken in an armbar than have my hamstring ripped off. So just the diverse library of submissions, pretty nasty stuff. The kid knows what he's doing. Somehow he's just a genius at that game, and I'll expect him to win more likely than not. But minus 250, and if money keeps coming in on Rosas Jr., maybe I will get to a moneyline bet on Jay Perrin. But I would have to hit like plus 230, plus 250. And I got to shout out my guy Danny, a.k.a. Herc MMA, his username is. He's been killing these like round 2, round 3 knockout props on the prelims of these past couple of UFC cards. And he's liking the Jay Perrin late knockout props, and I do not blame him. If you could get big plus money on, the round 2, round 3 knockout prop for Jay Perrin, just have the more tenured guy, the tougher guy, who's seen the later rounds more often, get a finish on Rosas Jr. if he adrenaline dumps. I don't mind those props at all, but overall I'm going to take Rosas Jr. to get a decision win or a late finish by submission. Up next at heavyweights, we've got Chris Daukaus taking on Jairzinho Rozenstruik. This is a fun heavyweight bout, but one that I don't want any part of from a betting perspective, I don't think. Unless the props drop wrong and fight doesn't go to decision or fight ends in knockout is something substantial, then I'll bet this fight. But picking a side, very hard to do here because you do have Jairzinho Rozenstruik, very accomplished kickboxer, like something like 100 kickboxing fights, as just a more powerful, more technical guy, but he's just so slow and plodding and low output at times. Looks like he's asleep in there. He's the minus 180 favorite. Chris Daukaus, the plus 145 underdog. And both guys coming off of knockout losses. Chris Daukaus was much more brutal against Curtis Blades in March. Before that, last December, he lost to Derek Lewis by knockout in round 1. Rozenstruik got stopped, sort of an early stoppage against Volkov, but that's the type of opponent that Rozenstruik loses to. It's Cyril Gane, a long, rangy, technical striker. Volkov, same thing. Ngannou, just a big power puncher, able to knock him out. Those are the guys beating Rozenstruik. He's got a 12-4 record, 11 knockouts out of 12 wins. Same exact thing can be said for Chris Daukaus, 11 knockouts out of 12 wins. So somebody's getting put to sleep most likely. Chris Daukaus has beaten the much lower level of competition, right? He can beat Parker Porter, Nascimento, Oleinik, Abdi Rakimov brutally. But as soon as he fights Blades and Lewis and the competition goes up a little bit, losing those fights. And the guy, a big guy, but he's... Let's face it, the guy could really trim down, and if he was a ripped professional athlete, he would be like a middleweight or something like that. This guy used to be a cop, probably hit the Dunkin' Donuts. He's kind of, bigger on the middle, but he hits hard. He's got some good counter 1-2s, but does not move his head off the center line. Footwork, not all that good. So for Chris Daukaus to win this fight and get the upset, he would have to really just stick and move quickly and effectively and not get cornered against the cage. Rozenstruik is very good at lulling his opponents into kind of a confident rhythm. He falls asleep, not very high output, throws leg kicks here and there, but he's got a very fast left counter hook. He's got a nice right straight, and once he lands once on you, then all of the combination follows, and he can end the fight. Usually slowly plods forward and traps his opponents against the cage where they don't really have an exit that they think that they're going to have. So Rozenstruik can lull you to sleep and then explode and put you out. So, and at any point, too, you can talk about the fight I don't want to talk about, but my guy Overeem, 4 seconds left in the fight, got knocked out after he was winning the entire thing. Broke my heart, and Rozenstruik, just has always been on my shit list the whole time, but he is dangerous. But I think the money line at minus 180 for Rozenstruik set exactly where it should be. But again, I don't see Daukaus sticking and moving very well. I think he's going to get confident, throw some counters, and leave his head right on the center line to get left hooked, and then the rest will follow. Give me a round 2 knockout for Jairzinho Rozenstruik, but again, anything short of the fight ending in knockout or the unders, not something I intend to play. Up next at featherweight, one of the most exciting fights on this card outside of the main event. 2 undefeated featherweight prospects fighting each other here. Bryce Mitchell, 15-0 at 28 years old. Ilia Topuria, 25 years old with a 12-0 record. Both guys, very good grapplers. BJJ black belts for each of them. Pretty good wrestling. Georgian wrestler for Ilia Topuria, good takedown threat. But he's got the hands as well. 3 knockouts for his last 3 fights. Bryce Mitchell, elite BJJ, good wrestling. That's 100% of his game, but he's very good at it, and he's going to go all in on that strategy. So money line right now, minus 140 to minus 150 for Topuria. Bryce Mitchell, the American farmer, rapper, flat earther, and submission artist here. The guy's plus 125 as an underdog. Could do a lot worse, 15-0. The guy was on The Ultimate Fighter where he faced his only loss, but that was an exhibition loss in the house where he actually got submitted himself by rear naked choke. But that was some time ago. Bryce Mitchell, the thing that I like about his record compared to Topuria, 6-0 in decisions. Topuria is not really going there that often. He does have 1 decision in the UFC over Yusuf Zalal. So something's going to give here for sure. Both guys, you know what Bryce Mitchell's going to do, probably the more predictable fighter because he does not have very good striking offense at all. He just came off of his biggest win of his career over Edson Barbosa, and Edson Barbosa was so scared shitless that he was going to get taken down. Bryce Mitchell actually hit him with a 3-2 counter, a right hook, a left straight counter, knocked Barbosa, the elite striker, right on his ass, and Bryce Mitchell got in on his hips and got the top control he needed, and that trend continued for 15 minutes. So even though Bryce Mitchell has 9 submissions out of his 15 wins, so far in the UFC, 4 of his 5 fights, he's won by decision. He does have that round 1 twister, though, over Matt Sales. That was pretty gnarly. So, both guys, very good submission, like Arsenal. They know how to chain submissions from one to the next. And, it's going to be a fun scramble battle if this goes to the ground. So who has the better wrestling? That's yet to be seen here. Who's the stronger guy? Yet to be seen. I do like Topuria. He does employ very powerful like suplexes and takedowns off the cage. Bryce Mitchell often, running the pipe, more of a successful route in chain wrestling from a single leg, getting the body lock, dragging his opponents to the ground, grabbing their wrists, just a smothering top pressure game that way. Topuria more of an explosive type of guy to get into the mat. So I got to go with the more well-rounded guy. I got to go with Ilia Topuria. I do like him to win this fight. And I think minus 140, minus 145 is a fair price on a guy with not only great grappling and submission skill, but an awesome pace and the power to end the fight with the striking, where Bryce Mitchell totally falls short. He doesn't have that. And his game is very predictable as a result. So this is a spot where, man, to get plus 125 on Bryce Mitchell, 15-0, as good as he is, as reliable as he is, not a bad look, but I'm going the other way. Moneyline bet on Ilia Topuria, but the fight doesn't go to decision. That could be an interesting look to see what that price would be. I do think this sees at least 1.5 rounds. I think this will be a sort of a scramble fest on the ground, maybe a tentative striking battle as well. I think this sees at least 7.5 minutes of action, but after that, I don't know if this goes to decision or not. Both guys will be in compromising positions with one another. What I also like about Topuria is he snatches up next with the guillotine, the anaconda choke. He's very, very good. Tight squeeze on him. So if Bryce Mitchell wants to get in too close, too reckless, too aggressive with the takedowns, Topuria could snatch up a neck and get a submission of his own. So give me the more well-rounded guy in Topuria. Up next at middleweight is a bout that I won't believe happens until it does. The return of Darren Till, who we never get a chance to see fight anymore, taking on Dricus du Plessis. The guys only differ 1 year apart in age, which it's always shocking to remember that Darren Till is only 29 years old for all that he accomplished, fighting for the belt a couple of times at 170. Now he's at 185 for the fourth time in this bout. Kept on missing weight throughout his career at 170, no longer can make it. And now he's 1-2 at 185. 1-4 in his last 5 fights in the UFC, riddled with injuries and inconsistencies, and the one fight that he won recently was against Kelvin Gastelum by a split decision, very close bout there. He could have easily, been the loser of that one as well and be 0-5 in his last 5 fights. So this guy is never been a high output striker, but he's got very clean, stylish, effective, but very sleek striking that kind of steals rounds, even when he doesn't get knockouts. I mean, he has 10 knockouts out of his 18 wins for Darren Till, but the guy had unbelievable power at welterweight. He was always a bigger guy at 6 foot tall and a long reach, and able to define rounds with big moments, knockdowns, and things like that, even when he doesn't end the fight by stoppage. So that's how he got by. That's how he was undefeated all the way until he went to challenge for the title against Woodley. And very good performances there. That's probably the peak of his career. Quick downward trajectory, especially after getting knocked out in his home country by the great George Masvidal. So that was kind of the turn. Since then, he went up to middleweight, and he's had to face grappler after grappler after grappler. So he fought. Well, first off, he pulled out of a lot of fights, right? He was injured against Hermanson in 2020, injured against Vittori in 2021, injured again against Hermanson in 2022 this year. The last KO this guy actually got was over Donald Cerrone. Like I said, sometimes he does get the knockdowns that steal rounds, but that was the last time he actually finished a fight. And he's known as a very good power puncher. Hasn't seemed to translate at 185 so far. But yeah, fighting a lot of grapplers now. Of course, Derek Brunson most recently, I believe that was most recently, he lost that by round 3, rear naked choke the last time he fought. So this is a spot where he's facing what seems to be a fellow kickboxer, but Dricus du Plessis, actually a very large man, very fast man at 28 years old, with 8 knockouts and 9 subs on his record. This guy is an absolute savage. So he KOs Marcus Perez, he KOs Trevin Giles viciously, and now he just got a decision win over Brad Tavares, a guy who refused to be taken down. He's got a very good takedown defense rating, notorious for that, but able to dig deep was Dricus du Plessis, land over triple digits on significant strike numbers, and go to his first decision ever and win that one over a very gritty veteran in Brad Tavares. So more explosive, faster, slightly younger, but more accurately than that, he's just younger in fight years. Doesn't have to fight miles. The damage done. Never been. He's been knocked out one time by Roberto Soldic back in the EFC, and that was a pretty brutal knockout. But since then, he's been okay. And give me the South African kickboxer here, Dricus du Plessis. I could even see him getting a club and sub somewhere down the stretch of this fight. I have no confidence that Darren Till either makes weight or even makes it to the cage. I just have my doubts about this, but I'm excited to see him. He's always a fan favorite, but give me Dricus du Plessis. I do have a money line bet on him when it was at minus 145. I think it's jumped all the way up to like minus 190 at this point for Dricus du Plessis. Up next, the co-main event of the evening at lightweight, we've got Paddy the Baddy Pimblett returning to Vegas for the first time since his debut. Since then, he's gone 3-0 in the UFC, and now he's facing a pretty well-rounded threat in the 11 UFC fight veteran Jared Gordon. So Paddy's going to have a little bit of size and height and reach, the youth of about 7 years. So a shiny 19-3 record as well. The guy's got 3 straight UFC wins, 3 straight finishes. Minus 250 favorite at this point, and money keeps coming in on Paddy Pimblett. Plus 200 can be had for the underdog Jared Gordon, who's 19-5. I got to say, Paddy Pimblett, pretty impressive so far for having a limited skill set, in my opinion. His striking needs a lot of work. He's a very frantic, kind of brawling striker, but his long reach of the weight class lets him get away with some things. His tough chin lets him get away with some things, like not tucking it, not keeping his hand up by his face, and kind of being super aggressive to close the distance and, being defensively lacking. So that gave him some trouble against Vendramini, but he was able to get a knockout of his own there. Vendramini no longer with the promotion. No striking threat against Kazula Vargas. He got taken down and submitted very quickly. Kazula Vargas, no longer with the promotion. And now Paddy Pimblett just beat over the summer Jordan Levitt, who we all know is not a striker, not a good wrestler, just a very good BJJ player and a crafty guy. So Pimblett actually had a lot of trouble with that guy. That was his toughest test yet. Pimblett had to dig deep and, get a rear naked choke in, I think it was round 2. But Jordan Levitt was able to stay in top position, control Paddy Pimblett for a while. Pretty interesting, because I think Jared Gordon would dust Jordan Levitt on any day of the week. So Jared Gordon, not the greatest. He is 7-4 in the UFC, but he's never lost a decision, and he uses a well-rounded wrestling game plan on everybody that's not a better wrestler than he is. So, he's coming off of a decision victory over Leonardo Santos, who was a BJJ threat. He has fought recently, Chris Fishgold, Joe Selecki, Grant Dawson. These guys are all BJJ threats in MMA. So the fact that Jared Gordon's preparing for BJJ practitioners year in and year out and doing decent against them, that's a pretty good sign in my opinion. And the cardio, I think, goes to Jared Gordon. Of course, the experience and the striking. Technical, very tight boxing goes to Jared Gordon. I think if this plays out on the feet for any period of time early, that big left hook from Jared Gordon could find its mark on the chin of Paddy Pimblett. That could be trouble. So I could see Jared Gordon actually getting this upset by decision, where he's undefeated, 11-0 in decisions. Paddy Pimblett probably needs a submission or a knockout in this bout. It's possible, but I don't think it's minus 250 likely, or minus 300 where this line is heading. I don't think it's that likely. So if this goes to like minus 275, minus 300 Pimblett by the end of the week, I'll be forced to take a money line bet for a unit on Jared Gordon if I get close to plus 250 on him. So I'm going to call Jared Gordon to use his better pace and pressure and wrestling, end up in top position more, do better work on the feet at striking range. Paddy Pimblett certainly has a path of victory laid out for him here, but is he a good enough wrestler? Is he tough enough? Has he made improvements in the striking to defend against a well-rounded threat in Jared Gordon? I'm not so sure about that. And at the money line right now, I think the value is on Gordon. So give me Gordon by decision to pull off the upset. Okay, we made it all the way to the main event of the pay-per-view. Potential 5-round bout for the 205-pound championship left behind by Yuri Prochazka, who had to vacate due to injury. Magomed Ankalaev, Jan Blachowicz. Jan could be a 2-time champion at 39, almost 40 years old, or we could finally crown another Dagestani as champion, with Magomed Ankalaev finally getting the belt that he's been aiming towards. 18-1 for Magomed Ankalaev. His only loss was literally at the last second of round 3. He did tap out to that triangle choke of Paul Craig several fights ago. Since then, he's been on a perfect run. 10 knockouts, 8-0 in decisions overall. This guy can really do it all. I mean, he's a former Greco-Roman wrestler, combat sambo background as well, and just a devastating kickboxer with power in his hands and feet. And this guy just fights a perfect fight. Good traditional boxing. Like I said, very good kicks as well. Hammers the leg kicks, body kicks, mixing up all the targets. And he's got the patience to let this go 5 rounds, but he also has the quick twitch counter-striking to catch somebody being too aggressive and end the fight inside the distance. So, and if he catches you over swinging, he'll just level change and take you down. He's got a perfect, optimal array of skills. And he's got the size to match as well. He's never outsized at this weight class as well. So, Jan Blachowicz, 29 wins, 9 losses. He's been in the UFC for some time now. Like I said, 39 years old. He certainly has a lot of fight miles on him, but very good combinations himself. He does sort of blitz forward and less of a predictable, but sometimes timed blitzes, kind of sprints. He'll target the body with a nice left body strike and then go over the top with the right hand and just kind of blitz, 2 and 3 punch combinations that way. Against lesser men, worse grapplers than him, he can level change and get the takedowns of his own and, get some top control time. That won't be on the table, I don't think, against Ankalaev. Unless by some fluke instance off the clinch, because Ankalaev is a very good takedown defense rating. So does Jan Blachowicz, but I just think it's a different level. Even Alexander Rakic was able to catch the kick, grab a single leg, and take Jan Blachowicz to the ground. And that was the last time Jan Blachowicz was in the cage. He had that very lackluster, it was a 2 rounds, kind of like maybe 1 round apiece for each guy. And then the Rakic injury happened, and, that canceled one of the main events this year. So Jan got the TKO stoppage. Magomed Ankalaev, similar boat. He finally got an inside-the-distance TKO stoppage over Anthony Smith because Anthony Smith's ankle was compromised. I think it was fully broken or something like that very recently. Other than that, Ankalaev has been on a very big decision streak earlier in March, 5-round decision over the dangerous Thiago Santos. Before that, I believe it might have been Volkan Ozdemir as well. Let's see where else he's got. Yeah, Volkan Ozdemir, Nikita Krylov, and then he had the couple bouts back-to-back with Ian Kuntalabo, who he finished both in round 1. So, like I said, this guy, if you're aggressive like Ian Kuntalaba and you blitz in the way that Jan does sometimes, I could see Jan getting pieced up by that big southpaw left straight of Ankalaev, maybe that lead right hook. Everything is very powerful that he throws, very technical and tight. But yeah, if you're patient and you don't be the aggressor, you don't work the clinch with the guy, you're going to get slowly over 5 rounds just outpointed at range with leg kicks and body kicks, some easy boxing combinations from Ankalaev. This guy does it all. He on average, he hits people more than he gets hit in return. He's more accurate than his opponent here in Jan Blachowicz, and he's got better defense on average than Jan Blachowicz. So, and if he does get hit, he's pretty durable so far as well, so never been finished. So there's a lot going in the favor that makes him a minus 255 favorite. I am on that side. I am a huge fan of Magomed Ankalaev and just the way, like I said, he's just got an optimal, well-rounded array of skills and size to back it up at this weight class. So I put a moneyline bet on him at minus 255. It's kind of held firm at that price right now. The over-under is set at 4.5 rounds, which is a scary proposition because, it's a common sense would tell you it's 2 big guys, 205-pounders in here. Everything is at risk of ending the fight at any instant, right? The tides can change whenever, at any point in the fight. So to bet the over at plus 125 feels like you'd want some more plus money to risk it that long. The under at minus 155 seems like it would make sense, but you look at the Ankalaev way of doing things, which I said there's 3 decisions. The only one that he got recently was that TKO from ground and pound on Smith because of the injury. Who knows? That might have gone to decision, had it been left to an injury-free bout. So you don't want to bet the under and then Magomed Ankalaev wins, the way that he has been winning by decision, and then he feels stupid. But then if you bet the over and that doesn't cash, then you'll say, well, of course, he's a dangerous striker, 10 knockouts, Jan Blachowicz, a ton of knockouts and subs as well. It's just one of those things where, you're just damned if you do, damned if you don't at the over-under at 4.5 rounds. I would say maybe look for the alternate when they drop. Look for the alternate. I know Bovada sometimes does the alternate totals at like over-under 3.5, over-under 2.5. Those are usually a high price tag, but it might be an easy way if you have a lean either way. I'm just banking on Ankalaev to do Ankalaev things, show he's the better striker, the better grappler, and get this thing done, most likely by decision, and crown himself as the new champion. So, yeah, I don't know. The money line, I think, is a fair price in Ankalaev when he's got everything going for him and such a stellar record. He could easily be 19-0 if it wasn't for tapping at literally 1 second left many, many years ago. That was back in 2018, his very first fight in the UFC. So since then, perfect run. Give me Ankalaev to get this done by decision. Okay, there you have it, you guys. All 12 fights broken down for UFC 282, the last pay-per-view of the year, and for the vacant light heavyweight championship, Magomed Ankalaev versus Jan Blachowicz. Very fun fights on this card. Hopefully, we keep a lot of these intact. Again, I mentioned in the beginning, check out my live stream tomorrow night, Tuesday, 9:30 p.m. Central Time with Clint from the Die Hard MMA podcast. We'll talk about props, betting spots we like, and just shoot the shit and have a good old time. It'll be an honor to have him on my show. Also, Couch Warrior podcast, if you're familiar with him, my guy Mike, go subscribe if you have not already to Couch Warrior podcast. On Wednesday night, we'll be starting a new tradition for pay-per-view fight weeks where myself and Couch Warrior, we host two other handicappers on stream, and we just talk about betting spots for the upcoming card and have a four-man panel. This week, we're starting it off with Johnny K. Picks and the great Eric Betts Fights. So that is on Wednesday night on Couch Warrior's channel this time, and it'll be at 9 o'clock p.m. Central Time. So tune in for that one. A lot of fun content this week for the fights. So let's close out the year strong. Hit the like, hit the subscribe. Let's keep the channel growing, and I'll talk to you guys very soon. Cheers.